Good evening and welcome to the Chapel of the Cross. Thank you for joining us from wherever you are and for tuning into the live stream. My name is Haddon Probst and I am one of the Lilly Leaders Co-Chairs for the Episcopal Campus Ministry, a diocesan-sponsored ministry to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. In 2015, the Chapel of the Cross received a Lilly Endowment Grant awarded to the campus ministry organizations to help undergraduate college students at public institutions draw on the wisdom of their religious traditions as they make decisions about the intersection of their spiritual lives and their chosen studies and careers. We are pleased tonight to celebrate 10 years of our ministry with this grant. One project of the grant is the My Spiritual Awakening Speaker Series. In this conversational setting, accomplished leaders across a variety of professional areas are invited to discuss their work and spiritual journey with our student and parish community. And now, as we bring that speaker series to this virtual platform, all of you. Actress Cate Blanchett once said, "When something is a vocation, you don't really make decision about it." Well, that may be true for Cate Blanchett. Some may follow a different path. What we call vocation comes from the Latin word vocare, meaning to call or be called. Presbyterian minister Frank Buechner says vocation means the work one is called to by God, the place where one's deepest passion meets the world's deepest needs. In other words, some people may simply find themselves in a job or place of work, while others may discover and discern a vocational path and follow a calling that lives both their spiritual spirit and those whom they serve in the world. Our speaker this evening is certainly doing work that meets the world's needs and does so far from a place of great passion and calling, and we're going to hear his story. Our student interviewer is Jesus Cabrera, who is a senior at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill from Newton Grove, North Carolina. He's also a good friend of mine and serves as a student chaplain for ECM. He currently serves as a student registrant at the Chapel of the Cross and spent 10 weeks in Quito, Ecuador as an Education Equals Hope student intern in 2023 with me and another student. It was another amazing project supported by the Lilly Endowment Transformative Travel Funds. Jesus is an environmental science major and minors in geological sciences and Russian culture. Paul Hurt is an alumni of Colorado College in Colorado Springs and received his master's in economics from the University of Texas. He attended law school at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville and began private practice in Colorado Springs in 1983. He first lived in Chapel Hill in 1990 when he joined Nature Conservancy as a regional attorney, attaining his LLM advanced postgraduate degree from the University of Florida's College of Law's graduate tax program. In 2001, he returned to the Conservation Fund as Deputy General Counsel and remained in that role until retirement in 2023. Paul has had the opportunity to teach courses on the business of conservation at his alma mater, Colorado College, in the economics and business departments. In his free time, he enjoys the outdoors, climbing, skiing, mountain biking, and mountain running. He's also a ukulele enthusiast and practices Tai Chi and yoga. Paul has been an active member of Episcopal parishes in a variety of places and enjoying his retirement with his wife Cheryl of 37 years.
Thank you, Haddon. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I guess let's just get started. So tell me, Mr. Hurt, what is or was your occupation?
I was an attorney. I graduated in 1983 and passed the bar in Colorado, and so for 40 years I was in active practice of law. Now I'm retired.
Yeah. Amazing. That's a lot of years. And how did your ambition to become an environmental conservationist begin?
I'm not sure that it was so much ambition. I was practicing in private practice in Colorado with a large corporate law firm representing, big corporations, real estate developers, banks, that kind of thing. And it just didn't sit right with me. I had, I guess, after a couple of years of fairly good reviews, because I was doing good work, I guess, as we approach the time when they start to think about making you whether you should be a partner in the law firm, I was advised that I was insufficiently motivated by money. And in a law firm, that's a real serious criticism. And I guess that got me to thinking that maybe this wasn't what I ought to be doing. And so I left there, was in-house attorney for a while at a bank, and that was worse. So in the midst of that, or sort of trying to think what I ought to do, and knowing that I ought to do something different from what I was doing, I saw an ad for the Nature Conservancy hiring a regional attorney in their Chapel Hill Southeast Regional office. And, I'd always loved nature. I'd always loved to be outdoors. Part of the reason I went to Colorado to go to school and went back there to work was because I loved the mountains. And so it seemed, the Nature Conservancy sounded like a good thing to do. In a sense, I guess my ambition was when I got the job, And I started to learn in that. Like I said, I always loved the outdoors. And being out in Colorado, surrounded by lots of beautiful, hundreds of thousands of beautiful acres. And I guess I sort of took it all for granted. And it wasn't until I came back and started working for the Nature Conservancy that I started to realize how much we were losing. And that not just, acreage, although certainly that, but biodiversity, plants, animals. And I guess it was that dawning recognition of what was being lost that it started to become less of a job and more of a vocation. And that grew and continued. I left the Conservancy in 1997 to go back to school, as you heard. And frankly, at that point, I was fairly frustrated with the Conservancy I thought it was not a particularly well-managed organization. I thought it was bureaucratic and not really getting the job done in a lot of ways. I went back to school for a while, studying tax of all things. Federal income taxation seemed to be the right thing to do at that point in my life. It wasn't. And after practicing again in private practice for a few years, a position opened up at the Conservation Fund, which is sort of like a little cousin, I suppose, in some ways, to the Nature Conservancy. It was founded by a man named Pat Noonan, who had been the president of the Nature Conservancy, and left because it was too large and too bureaucratic and too risk-averse, and not willing to take the risks, the entrepreneurial risks that were going to be necessary to make a real impact on conservation. And so I went to the Conservation Fund, and for 22 years I was Deputy General Counsel there. And, throughout the time, I guess I continued to think both my awareness of, God's creation and of our need to protect it, and that we weren't doing a very good job of it. And so that recognition grew. And then also at the Conservation Fund, I really was able to start focusing more and understanding more about the relationship between the land and conservation and communities. And a lot of the work that was most interesting to me and most rewarding to me had to do with trying to help further that process a bit. So.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Do you think you being like a deputy was like your overall most like overall like best accomplished thing? Or
well, we the fund in particular, when I joined it, was a very lean organization. We had about 75 people.
Okay.
It's probably 200 or a little over 200 now. And our bread and butter, I mean, we had other programs, and one of the interesting things, great things about working there was that they were very open to entrepreneurship by staff. But our bread and butter was doing what we called cooperative projects, where you bought land that the federal government or state governments wanted. They wanted to protect it, they wanted to conserve it for some reason. But the acquisition process, acquisition mechanism they can't buy land until Congress has appropriated, made an appropriation for that particular project. And it's pretty hard to tell a landowner, yeah, we'd like to buy your land to add to the national park or to add to the national forest. But you might have to wait 2 or 3 years for it to happen. And so the role that the Conservation Fund filled, and it was really kind of our bread and butter, was that we would go out and buy the property and then hold it until the federal state agency was in a position to take us out. And so I may have done a lot of other things, but the real core of the business was always real estate deals. I mean, I was a real estate transactional lawyer, is what it comes down to. I don't know, over the years, the size of the projects grew, and that was rewarding. We developed some new programs, and those were rewarding. And so that's, I wish I could say that as I, sat at my desk every day, I was conscious of trying to, of my spiritual values, conscious of trying to protect God's creation. And frankly, mostly what I was doing was trying to close this next transaction, figure out how the heck to get the next deal done. And it was in some ways it was a much higher pressure job than a lot of the other ones I'd had in terms of the volume of work, but it was rewarding ultimately. So.
Yeah, I do agree. It's like very rewarding when you're just like helping a community who is like in need, especially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering this question. Now I want to transition now into like your spiritual awakening. But before we start, I just want to ask, like, were you always born and raised Episcopalian, or?
No, when I was born, and for the first, 9 years of my life, we were Methodists. My parents were both Methodists, so I was a Methodist as much as a 9-year-old child is anything. In 1962, we moved to a little town. My father went to work for the manned space program, working on the Apollo program, and we moved to Texas and ended up in a little town called Friendswood that was south of Houston. At the time, it was like 900 people. And when we moved there was no Methodist church there. There was a Society of Friends church there, ergo the name Friendswood. They had founded it. Very different than the Quakers that you know from Pennsylvania, from Philadelphia. These were much more like strict Southern Baptists. No alcohol, no tobacco, and no dancing in the city limits. But we joined, there was an Episcopal mission there, and we joined that. and it was outside the city limits, so we could have high school dances there. And when I started, we had a deacon. And we had to share him with another mission that was about 40 miles down the road. And so he'd do morning prayer at Good Shepherd Episcopal and hop in his MG and head down the road for 40 miles and do morning prayer at the church in Hitchcock. Eventually, he was ordained a priest and was assigned strictly to us, so he didn't have to head down to the other church immediately after our church. So that was a big step up for us as a mission. And as my parents were active in the church. My dad was on the vestry. My mother was in altar guild. And I was an acolyte, and then a junior lay reader, and then a full-fledged lay reader. And because we only had the one priest, whenever he was on vacation or was out of town for some reason, a lay reader had to just do morning prayer. And because I could get up for the 8 o'clock service, that was often me. So I did a lot of morning prayer in the 8 o'clock service. I was pretty active when I was practicing law in Colorado Springs with the church there. Was a lay reader and a chalice minister, and on the vestry eventually. So.
Very interesting. Thank you so much. And can you share us the moment or experience that sparked your spiritual awakening?
Share. I'm sorry. Say it again.
Like share a moment or experience that sparked your spiritual awakening.
I wish I could. I mean, I wish I could, describe a road to Damascus kind of thing, and I can't. It's been an evolution, and, frankly, talk about awakening, it often seems more like, waking up when you have to get up really, really early, far earlier than you wish to, and you don't want to turn on the lights because you don't want to wake your wife up. And so you stumble around in the darkness and you bump into the doors and knock into the furniture and trip over the shoes that you left lying out. And you just kind of put one foot in front of another, and you make it to the day and you accomplish what you hope to do that day. And I guess, to be honest, that's a more honest description of my spiritual awakening. Is it's a lot of missteps and bumping around and uncertainty, and trying to put one foot in front of the other. I mean,
yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah. No, I should.
Fairest I can say.
Yeah. Do you have any practices or habits that you've implemented to support your spiritual growth?
Yeah, I try. One of the most consistent things throughout my adult life is, and we got them, I noticed them out and they're always around here, the little booklets, forward day by day. I've read that and used that for I don't know how many years, and that's a good way to start the morning. Some years ago, my sister-in-law gave me a little sort of personal prayer book called Hour by Hour. It's also published by the same people that publish Forward Day by Day, and it's just a series of 7-day, it repeats every 7 days. I mean, it's not, you don't go all the way through the church year, lectionary or anything, but it has a morning prayer, noontime, evening, and then a compline. They're all short, and I try to do those. I'm pretty good about the morning prayer, less good about the others. Try to catch up with compline in the evening when I can. I try to meditate every day. I went to the program here on centering prayer, and I guess what I kind of do is sort of a centering prayer light. I'm not up to the 20 minutes that they prescribe twice a day, but I can generally manage 15 minutes at least once a day, and so I do that. And then I show up here on Sundays.
Yeah.
So, and
It's always a good Sunday service.
Christmas and Easter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other holy
Yeah, me
days.
too. Thank you. What are like the challenges that, like you faced during your vocational and spiritual journey, and how did you overcome them?
The biggest challenge I faced spiritually, and I didn't really allude to it, I mentioned that I had been on the vestry of the church in Colorado Springs, and not long after being elected to the vestry, the Houston Chronicle, not Houston Chronicle, what am I saying? The Colorado Springs Gazette, Telegraph, had a full page, front page article about how our priest had just been named in a lawsuit in Denver along with the diocese because of an inappropriate relationship he had had during a pastoral counseling relationship. This all occurred at a prior position, but he was our rector now. And it really caused just an awful rift in the church between people that were very upset, very concerned, felt that he had to leave, immediately, and people that, he had a lot of skill. He preached a great sermon. He had been a drama major in college, and he put on a great show, and a lot of people thought he should, be forgiven, that that's what the church is all about. And I think the one thing that they could all sort of agree on was the vestry was doing it wrong. Whatever the vestry was doing wasn't right. And that was honestly one of the most painful and difficult experiences I've had. And to be honest, it's the reason when we first moved to North Carolina, we went to the Friends meeting, my wife and I and stepson, for a period. I went to church, to Episcopal church, including Chapel of the Cross for Christmas and Easter, but otherwise. And it's kind of why I have not really been very, even though I attended church, I have not been a particularly, until very recently, not been much involved beyond showing up on Sunday. And so it's, in terms of recovery, it's been kind of a long, slow process. And there's other things going on there too. My wife and I were sort of unsettled in terms of where we were living, and I was working in Arlington, Virginia for quite a while, and so, there was some just mechanical problems. But a big part of the reason that I've not didn't fully trust a parish, I guess, until I started coming here. So.
Thank you. You have mentioned that like you have this passion, not for the job, but like to conserve nature because of its beauty and stuff, and et cetera, et cetera. But like, do you think that corporate greed is also part of like your challenges that like you experience during your spiritual journey?
Yeah. I've joked that part of why I'd done what I'd done with the conservation fund for so many years was that if you go back to Colorado Springs and if you look at it the way it was when I was there as a student at Colorado College in 1975, I graduated, and you look at it now, north almost to Castle Rock and east almost to Peyton, and southwest down toward Fort Carson is all developed. It's all subdivision. And, a lot of and we represented all those developers. I represented, that's a lot of the work I did at the fund. And so I kind of joke that what I did with the Conservation Fund was paying for my sins. But yeah, I think it goes way beyond conservation. I think corporate greed is, in some ways, one of the biggest challenges this nation faces in all sorts of ways, but it certainly manifests here. There are other sides to it too. I mean, I did a project some years ago, two projects sort of combined, 35,000 acres in Maine, Aroostook County, Maine, 3,500 acres in Brunswick County, North Carolina, and that was all funded by the Apple Corporation. So, corporate greed is kind of a funny thing. Pat Noonan, our founder of the fund, used to say, people talk about tainted money, and he said the only tainted money is when they're taint enough, And so, I do have that in my makeup too, is that it takes money to do conservation, and you got to get it somewhere, and sometimes that means, and oftentimes that can mean finding it at corporations. And so, yeah, I think corporate greed's a huge problem, but it's not monolithic, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much. Did your spiritual beliefs evolve or deepen as you went through the process of your spiritual awakening?
It's very much an evolution.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah.
And I would hope that, God willing, if I'm around 5 years from now, I'll look back on this and think how naive I was, how shallow, how immature my thinking was. And if I lived to be 100, I would hope that I'd look back to when I was 90 and say that, I mean, for me, it has been an ongoing process, and I assume will be.
Thank you. I mean, you seem to accomplish a lot, but do you still have any hopes or goals for your continued spiritual journey?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have a lot for the spiritual journey. You meant, or I guess, when the little introduction, I am teaching some at Colorado College, my alma mater, and that really means a lot to me. I'm enjoying that immensely because I enjoy working with students, and it's a real pleasure. I'm going to be teaching a course out there this spring again, and next academic year I'm going to be teaching two courses. I sold the department. I proposed another course, and they agreed that made some sense, and so I'm going to be teaching two courses out there in the 25-26 academic year, and I'm excited about that because I like working with students. Before I came here tonight, I'm in a mentoring program out at CC, and I was mentoring a young woman that was assigned to me as a mentee. And aside from the fact that she's a physics major, and that means she's about 100 times smarter than I am, it's a lot of fun, and I'm enjoying it. And so that's.
Thank you. And I kind of want to dig. I kind of want you to kind of dig deep. This one, this one's also a really hard question for me to answer, because I'm also very, very interested into environmental science and conserving nature as well. But what would be an ideal relationship between science and religion?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can envision. Well, I guess in a sense, I can envision an ideal relationship. I grew up in a scientific or at least technological household. I mean, my dad, before he was at NASA, he was at the Naval Underwater Sound Laboratory. He was with the Army Ballistic Missile Agency, and then he was with NASA for 14 years, I guess, working on the Apollo program. And many of the people in our church, quite a few of the Episcopalians that came in and helped form that church, were men and women who worked at NASA. And so many of the kids that I grew up with and went to school with were NASA people, or the children of NASA people. So, I grew up in a milieu that was very much, and yet, we all went to church. And I guess it never occurred to me really that there was a conflict there, or that there was any tension between the two. I understood that the Bible, in Genesis said one thing, and that was different from what I understood from paleontology and cosmology and, physics, astronomy. But I didn't see a tension there because I guess I always understood that the Bible, although it was divinely inspired, but that like all human writing, it involves metaphor and allegory and perhaps even hyperbole at times, I don't know. And so I never felt a tension there. When I was in 5th grade, my first year in Friendswood, as I say, the community, except for these godforsaken Episcopalians that were moving in, was all very conservative, Southern Baptist and things. And I remember in class getting into a discussion with a young woman who thought evolution was, I was talking the devil's work there. And so the teacher had us do a little debate, and we debated, and she kind of finished up by saying, and maybe you are right, but why did you have to tell me about it, or something to that effect. And I realized that, that there was a tension there. I mean, obviously there was a divide there. And, secondly, that probably I hadn't been particularly kind or thoughtful in how I presented my ideas to her. I certainly didn't recant anything that I believed, but it helped me to realize that maybe I hadn't done it in a kind way. And so that was a good lesson. There's a lot of people out there that are scientists that, are sort of adamantly opposed to religion because you can't verify it empirically. And to me, there's an I think that's an erroneous way to look at it. I think that's a false way to look at it, because there's a heck of a lot out there that we can't verify empirically. There's an awful lot of things that, in any element of science, there are huge, you've got relativity as one of the great, most powerful, important theories that man's ever come up with. And you got quantum mechanics. That's one of the most powerful theories or views of the world that man's ever come up with. And they don't fit together. If one's right, the other can't be, except they are. And a lot of physicists are still working on that. And so to me, to say that you don't believe in God because it's not empirically verifiable is foolish. It's a mistaken view. But I guess, you say what's the ideal thing? Well, at first my thought was, well, no, I don't know what the ideal is, but in a funny sort of way, the way I grew up surrounded by people who, were putting a man on the moon, and yet we're in church every Sunday, and we're lay readers and, things like that. So I guess maybe that's my ideal, and that's what I've tried to do since.
Very interesting. I didn't really think of it that way, but yeah, like, wow. That does answer like some of my doubts that I have in my head when I'm thinking about that question.
Okay.
And yeah, thank you.
This is an aside, but it always struck me that when my dad was an undergraduate in engineering at the University of Virginia, so, entirely reputable school, he had a professor that just adamantly swore humans could not fly faster than the speed of sound. And I don't think he ever really explained that, but, that was something that a professor could stand up at a good university and tell undergraduates that, just can't happen, can't work. And then, my dad spent his whole life, or professional life, much of it, premised on the idea that humans could fly much faster than the speed of sound, and doing it. And so, there's a lot out there that science doesn't know, or at any given instant. And that, obviously, you need to keep working at it. And I think we're called to continue learning about it, but to presume that you know it all at any given moment is just foolishness and presumptuousness. So.
Thank you so much. So for me, like, I've always grew up religious because of my mother, and like during my like spiritual journey, like it was always like surrounded by my parents and my Christian life as an Episcopalian. So like, and like, of course, there are other events that played like into my spiritual awakening. But what I'm trying to get to, go from this is like, were there like any events or people that played a role to your spiritual journey?
Oh yeah, I mean, lots of
Yeah.
people. My parents, obviously. I had a lot of good clergy that I was associated with. I mean, our church there in Friendswood was small. We only had one priest at a time, one rector. Well, actually, we were a mission, so we didn't have a rector. We had a vicar, I guess. Is that right? Anyway. And then, there was another priest that was actually a chaplain at A&M, and somehow I got to be friends with him. I never went to A&M. But he had a heck of an influence on me, a guy named Wes Seeliger. And I don't know, a lot of other people that I've met along the way that, priests, including some that I can think of here at Chapel of the Cross that have had a pretty profound influence. And, I guess beyond that, I've been really fortunate to have some wonderful teachers. I had my track coach in college had been before he ended up coaching track at Colorado College, he had been a professional heavyweight fighter in New York City. That's how he paid his way through college. He fought in the finals of the Olympic trials, what was it, 56 or 52, I can't remember. He fought a middleweight named Floyd Patterson, who went on to become the world heavyweight title. And Coach Flood earned his living fighting professionally, and he was a sparring partner for Rocky Marciano and Ezra Charles, who, those names don't mean much to you, but if you're somebody my age, the thought of being in the same ring with either of those guys is pretty horrifying. And he was a rough Irishman that drank far more than he ought to, but he was also one of the kindest men I've ever known. And he taught me more about kindness and the fact that you didn't have to act rough and tough all the time. And I can't tell you enough. I could tell you Frank Flood stories all night long, but I can't say enough about what a good human being he was. And I'd have to say he ranks pretty high on my spiritual journey.
Oh.
And, my wife,
Yeah.
she challenges me all the time. So, I mean, challenges me intellectually, not.
Yeah. Of course, of course.
So,
Thank you so much. I kind of want to dive into another topic, more of a fun topic. Like you mentioned, from your biography, you mentioned that you take ukulele courses. Like where did that come from? Like I'm very curious about that.
I have always loved music, and I am probably as musically inept as it is possible for a human to be. I mean, there are probably clams that could be taught music more rapidly than I've. My mother tried with piano, my mother tried with guitar, all hopeless. In 2016, in the summer, a friend of mine who had already retired and had more time on his hands than he should have, sent me a YouTube video of the Ukulele Orchestra of Great Britain. And I watched that, and I watched some of their other videos, and I laughed my butt off. They were great. And I commend them to anybody. Check out YouTube. And so I thought, I'll never be the musician they are, but I can maybe have fun the way they seem to be having fun. And so I got a ukulele. It's cheap. The one I had then was. And I found jams both in Durham and Chapel Hill were full of, real supportive people that didn't care that I was totally inept. And so it was fun. And then when COVID came and it shut everything down and the jams, the Chapel Hill one died and the Durham one went online, which wasn't much fun. A woman named Lisa Ray, who's one of the 8 members of the Ukulele Orchestra of Great Britain, one of the 8 performers, and also their creative producer and stuff, asked me if I wanted to take lessons. And I said, oh yeah. And so from the start of COVID lockdown until, I guess my last one was in May, the end of May, and she's been touring so much and doing a lot of it, so we email each other about once a week, but haven't had a lesson since then. But that's been just huge because she's not only an incredibly gifted musician and a very good teacher, but just a really, really lovely person and has become a wonderful friend. And sent me a page yesterday to help me get through this, of things to do when I'm talking to y'all and things. So she could not be a better friend. And she's actually, never given up on me, and I've made a little bit of progress. So there you go. So.
It's amazing.
Well, I think that is a very good note to come to a close on. And I wanted to say, Paul, I'm so grateful to you and Jesus for having this conversation and letting us listen in. There are a lot of challenges that you shared about leadership faltering and, faith changing and being shaken over the years. And also just the powerful witness of naming your own weakness, your own sense of connection to some of the things that as a younger person you participated in, and sort of seeking to make amends with some of your vocational choices moving forward. There's just so much to glean and learn from that. And it's also wonderful that in your retirement, you're getting to share so much of your wisdom, not only with us, but as a college professor at your alma mater. What an incredible thing. And I'm actually a little sad we didn't ask you to bring your ukulele to play.
No, you're not. No, you're not.
Maybe next time. You'll have
No,
to
you're
plan
not.
a jam.
No, you're not. Just real quick, too, one says, if anybody here has any questions that want to talk about law school, being a lawyer, working in conservation, any of those things, I'd be delighted to talk with you anytime. Seriously, I'm really, really happy to talk, so I got time. so
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for being a part of this speaker series that is going to culminate with our celebration of 10 years of the Lilly Endowment Grant that has been housed here at the Chapel of the Cross. That grant we're going to celebrate at the reception following this conversation. So I do invite everyone to join us in the parish hall for a very brief presentation and some really, really great food. But are there any questions just before we go in there for Paul at this time? Okay, we'll know that we will have, oh, Margot.
In the conservation fund, what is the project you're most proud of?
I'm sorry, I'm having...
In the conservation fund, what is the project you're most proud of?
Gosh, hard to say. I mean, it really is, because there's so many that were good. Maybe and it's one of the last ones. We closed a project in the summer of 2022. We bought everything that Potlatch had left in Minnesota. We bought quite a bit of acreage from them before for different things, additions to the Boundary Waters canoe area and different things. But that summer, we were able to negotiate a bulk sale of everything they owned, of all the timberland they owned in northern Minnesota. And it was about, I guess, 75,000 acres. And it was on scattered, sort of little tracts scattered over 14 counties. So it was a lot of work putting it together. But we closed on that. And then about a year later, we completed a sale. 28,000 acres of that were in the Boys Fort Ojibwe Reservation up in northern Minnesota, and had been part of the original reservation given to the Boys Fort Band. And then, as was our want in our society and in our government, we took it away, took most of it away from them. And this 28,000 acres was in the original boundary of their reservation. And we were able to sell that to them at a good price, a price they could afford. And that was the biggest rematriation of land to a reservation or to a tribe or band ever. It was the biggest, and we've done some smaller ones too, but that was a biggie, and that was a big one.
Well, thank you, Paul, for your dedication through your career and for joining us tonight. And let's go and celebrate. Please make your way. We'll join you in just a moment.